Well, when the Syngman Rhee government came in August 1948, we had combat troops on the ground in Korea. And in that situation, the U.S. demanded operational control, not just of our own troops, but of Korean troops and of the national police. And the fundamental reason was Syngman Rhee had talked many times about marching north to take over the north. And the U.S. Did not want to be in a situation where the South Koreans might provoke a war and our combat troops would instantly get into it. So we had operational control of the military and the police until June 30th, 1949, when our combat troops left. And then when the war began in June, a year later, in early July, MacArthur took command of the whole South Korean army and the national police. And we have kept that command ever since, not of the police, but of the military. In the early 1990s, it was changed such that from MacArthur's decree in July 1950 until the early 1990s, we had operational control of the Korean army inside South Korea. But during the Gwangju Rebellion in 1980, crack troops were released from the DMZ to come down and suppress rebels in Gwangju, and the U.S. took a lot of heat for that, for allowing that release to happen. It looked like we were involved in suppressing what was a civil rebellion in the city of Gwangju, and actually we were. And these gears grind very slowly, but by the early 1990s we had given up our control of the South Korean army inside South Korea, but we still retain operational control in a crisis with North Korea. And the reason is the same as it was in August of 1948. Not so much that South Korea wants to attack the North as it did back in 1948, or as Rhee said he wanted to, but there can be an incident, an uprising or something, where suddenly the two Koreas could be at each other's throats. And the best example of that is when the North Korean terrorists blew up the South Korean cabinet in Rangoon in 1983 and nearly killed the president, Chun Doo-hwan, and killed several members of his cabinet. Chun Doo-hwan came storming back to Seoul and wanted to punish the North, but the U.S. prevented him and were able to prevent him because we have operational command of that army. General Richard Stilwell, who was also a covert operator during the Korean War, he was the head of the Asian covert operations for the CIA during the Korean War, but he was also a general, and he was in command of our troops in the mid-70s. And he said, we have a piece of Korean sovereignty that is unparalleled anywhere else in the world by virtue of our command of a 650,000-man army. Ultimately, what this tells you is we have a deterrent in Korea that deters the North and deters or constrains the South. And that is the kind of deterrent you get in a civil war situation. It's a divided country. It was fundamentally a civil war, and we, over time, developed a civil war deterrent to deal with it. We keep them apart. Recently, the Obama administration has developed policies that tend to undercut that civil war deterrent. One of them is to allow South Korea to have missiles that can reach any point in North Korea, cruise missiles. South Korea has been under the missile control technology regime for many, many years, and that regime limits South Korea to 300 miles or 180 kilometers in the length of missiles, so they have short-range missiles. An exception was made last year so that South Korea could, I think the missiles now have a range of 800 kilometers, in any case enough to cover all of North Korea. And then we're supplying South Korea with drones, which will irritate the North Koreans no end because we and the South Koreans spy on them by every means necessary. Because we don't have good human intelligence about the regime. We have satellites and listeners and infrared detectors and everything you can imagine targeted on North Korea. But these drones, as we've seen, for example, in Iran, where they've shot a couple of them down, can be can result in incidents that might ratchet up tensions or even ratchet up a war in Korea. Secondly, they're very vulnerable to being shot down or captured, in which case North Korea would reverse engineer the drones, just like they reverse engineered Russian Scud missiles. I mean, the whole North Korean missile system is essentially re-engineered Soviet missiles. And so that's another danger of that. But the ultimate danger is that this could lead to some kind of a clash between North and South that we would inevitably be involved in because of our continuing operational command of the South Korean Army. Now that command, under Presidents Kim Dae-jung and his successor Roh Moo-hyun, they were trying to do two big things. One was to get back operational command of the Korean military. President Noh said this is a matter of our independence and autonomy, which it certainly is. And second, to get this gigantic military base in downtown Seoul out of Seoul, the Yongsan base. The Chinese set it up in the late 1880s. The Japanese took it over and had it till 1945 and improved it many, many ways. And then our generals have used it ever since. And it used to be on the outskirts of Seoul. Now it's right essentially downtown. And it's flypaper for all kinds of protests by students and dissidents and so on. So they made an agreement to get that base out of Seoul and to end operational command of the Korean Armed Forces, but it hasn't happened yet. The operational command, I believe, is supposed to end in 2015 or 16, but I wouldn't be surprised to see something come along that would postpone it. It's just a very, very important thing that hardly ever gets into our discourse in this country or into the press, that yeah, we operationally command the South Korean Army, 650,000 strong. Well, I've been very aware of the protest of this base and have signed petitions against it and all of that, but I've had trouble understanding the logic for it. Okinawa is within very close shooting range of most targets that we might have in Northeast Asia. I mean, we were flying B-52s to Vietnam to bomb Vietnam from Okinawa. We certainly can hit most of the Chinese mainland. Our Navy has bases all over the Pacific. Furthermore, we don't really need bases different than those we have in Japan. I mean, Yokosuka near Tokyo is the base of the Pacific Fleet. It was the base of the Japanese Navy during and before World War II. It's a huge installation. We have Sasebo. We have 2 or 3 other naval bases in Japan. Why do we need a naval base on Jeju Island unless it's just to, you know, rub the Chinese nose, provoke the Chinese into thinking that our containment policy toward them is just getting closer and closer. And why does the Korean Navy need a base there? Chinhae is its biggest naval base near Busan. It's a stone's throw from Jeju Island. So I've never quite understood the rationale for this base, but I certainly understand the protests because Jeju is one of the only places in South Korea that does not have a nearby American military base. And when you have American military bases, or Korean ones for that matter, you have camp towns that grow up around the base, a lot of prostitution, drugs, drinking, and you know, young American soldiers getting into trouble. So that combined with Jeju's deep anti-Americanism for reasons that we've discussed going back to the 1940s rebellion, you know, makes it, I think, an entirely unwise thing to do. But it isn't something that I've studied in part because you can't get, you know, unlike something that happened in the 50s, you can't get documents on it that really show what the reason for this is. But I admire the protests for keeping it up and making this an international issue now.